Exiting and Returning to the Parental Home for Boomerang Kids by Sarah E. Sandberg, Toma, Anastasia R. Snyder, and Bohyun Joy Jang. So, this article begins by talking about how the young adults are commonly exiting and returning to the parental home, but even though there's been an increase in Boomerang kids, there is still very few studies who have examined the motivation behind these exits and returns using a life course framework. Now, before I continue talking about this article, I just wanted to say how that even though in my personal research, I'm not going to be focusing on why they're returning explicitly, I am including this into my triangle. It is a part of my triangle, so and this is a great article for that. So that is why I am including this in my research. So now to go on to the literature review, they go on to talk about how although mental health problems have been linked to difficulty transitioning to adulthood in general, the explicit assumption that Boomerang kids are stunted has not been tested empirically. And they go on to say how the studies that do exist commonly link demographic, family formation, and family of origin characteristics to home leaving and returning behavior, but that none of the research examined the role of mental health problems such as depression and alcohol abuse in the research, how it's been relatively ignored. So they also go on to say how very few studies have examined the socioeconomic context that likely contributes to youth's exit from and returns to the parental home. Then they go on to talk about their study, and they say how in this study they are going to provide one of the first explorations into the role of mental health and economic factors in the home leaving and returning process. In this study, this study is built on prior research by examining the role of individual characteristics in the home leaving and returning process. And that in this research, they're going to be addressing 4 research questions, which are as follows. How is mental health associated with the first exit from the parental home? How is mental health associated with the first return to the parental home? How are economic characteristics associated with the first exit from the parental home? And how are economic characteristics associated with the first return to the parental home? Now, to test out all these questions, these are their methods. So they are using a public and geocode data from the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth, which is a nationally representative panel sample of youth born between 1980 and 1984 in the United States. This study was designed to capture detailed information on employment and educational experiences, family and community backgrounds, and family formation patterns of youth. In the study, they interviewed respondents annually from 1997. They kept on interviewing the same respondents every year as they grew older. And on average, the respondents were 24 years of age, and the initial sample consisted of 8,984 young adults who completed in-home interviews in 1997. In the study, the exiting from and the returning to the parental home were measured using data about household members who shared a residence with the young adult. The economic characteristics were measured in the study by participant poverty status, employment, and education from the 1997 through the 2011 survey years. And emotional distress in the study was measured biannually at the 2000, 2002, 2004, 2006, 2008, and 2010 survey years as the occurrence of the family's symptoms on a scale that ranged from 1, which meant all the time you were emotionally distressed, or 4, none of the time you were emotionally distressed. Now onto the results. So in the study, they found that young adults' mental health and economic factors influence the timing of exits and returns to the parental home after controlling for demographic and parental characteristics. They found no evidence that poor mental health measured by emotional distress and alcohol problems was associated with a delayed first exit. Instead, they found evidence that emotional distress was associated with an earlier first exit from the parental home. They also found evidence that poor mental health was associated with an earlier return to the parental home for the returning youth. So they found that poor mental health was associated with the people who returned earlier with from that for people, like if you returned earlier, they found evidence that associated that with poor mental health. And contrary to other findings and their hypothesis, they found that their results did not point a clear link between greater economic resources and earlier home leaving and delayed home returning. Contrary to their expectations, they found that post-secondary education was associated with delayed exits and young adults poverty, and they found that obtaining less than a high school degree was associated with earlier exits. Furthermore, they found that full-time employment was associated with an earlier first return for returning youth, and they found that young adults poverty and unemployment were associated with delayed first returns for returning youth. Overall, these results provide evidence that both mental status and young adult economic factors influence decisions to exit and possibly return to the parental household. The results also highlighted the diversity amongst the young adults who are exiting and returning to the parental home.